Welcome. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm Brian Hoke, an emeritus member of the Focus Greater Syracuse Board. I'm standing in for, but by no means replacing, Rita Riker, Focus Board Chair. These Focus forums are public discussions with expert panelists on topics affecting our region, such as education, the environment, and local government. Each session, as will be the case today, includes presentations and a moderated question and answer, fostering community engagement and learning. This most recent November, Focus Greater Syracuse and Peace Incorporated held a whole family summit to develop collaborative, family-centric solutions for basic needs. Funded by the CNY Community Foundation, it served as a pilot for future initiatives. We're lucky to have participants from that forum back for today's discussion. We'll cover the whole family approach and summit findings. I will note that we're recording today's session. It'll be available, as all previous forums are, on the Focus website soon. So now I'll turn it over to Todd Gailey from Peace Incorporated to start the discussion. Todd, over to you.
Thank you, Brian. My name is Todd Gailey. I'm Vice President of Operations and Strategy here at Peace. Thank you for joining us today for this conversation about whole family approaches. I'd like to introduce the other individuals in this room. So first we have Sarah Easterly, who is the 2Gen Onondaga Program Director and works at Onondaga County Department of Social Services and Economic Security. We have Saisha Bird, who is the Commissioner of Syracuse Department of Parks, Recreation and Youth Programs. We have Jackie Evans, who is Peace Inc. Head Start Parent Engagement and Male Involvement Coordinator. And we have Maribel Arce, who is Director of Grants and Planning here at Peace. So today what we're going to do is talk a little bit about whole family. I'm going to set it up, introduce some brief concepts, hand it over to the experts. As Brian said, there was an event where we talked about these issues with the community in November. There is a report that is coming out that Maribel principally led the writing for. She'll provide some high-level insights and conclusions from it. That report will also be available after this forum, both on the Peace Inc. and Focus website. So with a whole family, what we want to do, and our experts, subject matter experts here will get into it more specifically, but when we talk about whole family, it's really thinking about a new approach for providing services and thinking about how do you help families. Many times it can be called 2Gen. For the cases here, we preferred whole family because we're seeing more and more, and our experts will talk about this. We're seeing multiple generations, 3 generations. We want to acknowledge the different roles and that generations play in a family and a household stability. So when we talk about whole family, we're talking about a range of factors that help support and empower and make these families healthy. It can be a combination of social capital, of economic assets, of education, post-secondary and employment education and employment opportunities for parents, quality health, including mental health, early childhood education. These are all factors that go in and are key ingredients that when these experts talk about the work they do, go into not just helping a child or helping a parent, but helps the whole family. So what does that mean? Previously, let's say, for instance, a food pantry, that would be predominantly an adult-focused outreach, right? Versus a child care site. A typical child care site would be more geared towards the child. As Jackie and our experts will hear, a 2Gen approach. Jackie is from Head Start. Head Start sets goals both for the children and the parents, and they work collectively to achieve them. And so that's the concept. Part of it also is that no one agency and no one government entity can do this alone. And so for whole family approaches to be successful, there has to be collaboration and partnership across systems. The other thing is that what is a different approach is that 2Gen really puts the priority on cultural competency as well as parent voice. So rather than, for instance, typical top-down strategies, as you'll hear from our experts, it's about engaging the families themselves, hearing what's important to them, and then giving them the resources in which they can thrive. It's these concepts then also which led to our event in November, because again, we had a national subject matter expert from National CAP. We had our local experts. And then it was important to convene partners and families themselves to bring up, not just talk about their needs, but talk about solutions. So what did they need from our systems and from our services in order to thrive? And so again, that event was acknowledging whole family, but acknowledging that it takes a village to do this work. So that's kind of the approach that we'll go at from today. We'll talk with our 3 subject matter experts for a few minutes. Maribel will provide a high-level summary of the summit and the report out, and then we'll open up additional questions to you. So I'll start with Sarah. Okay. So talk to me a little bit about, what is the work that you do around a whole family approach? And how are some of the ways that you're serving multiple generations?
Sure. So traditionally, the Department of Social Services has been very siloed. When adults come in, right, it's an adult that comes in for public benefits, whether it's temporary housing, whether it's SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, whatever it might be, it's usually the adult. And traditionally, we only worked with the adults. And it was really a siloed, just give them, determine if they're eligible and send them on their way. Are they compliant? So we've kind of shifted that thinking. So we're taking it a step further. So you do have to be receiving benefits to be part of the two-gen Onondaga program, but it's different in that we're providing intensive case management wraparound services for families, and we're focused on not just that adult, not just that parent coming in, but we're also focused on, well, what's happening for the whole entire family? Is that adult, who are they living with? What does the household look like? And specifically too around the children in that household and the child or the family dynamics within there, because we also want to try to help maybe prevent the cycle of generational poverty. So we're trying to help with child development goals and really trying to help increase that access to services for children so that we can try to help prevent that. So that's kind of what we're doing right now.
And what are some of those services that you're providing?
So we're partnering, so Onondaga County has so many amazing services. I mean, us in the room, we kind of are part of that, right? But we partner with Help Me Grow, and we're trying to do assessments, developmental assessments, because sometimes these kids might not be seen by community partners right away, especially little ones. So we're trying to help parents, like, do you have a question? Like, is there a concern? Do you have a concern about your child? Any developmental delays or anything you've noticed? So we try to, engage in conversation around that. So that's one specific thing we're doing is partnering with Help Me Grow. We've made referrals to Head Start, partnering for parents who have kids that either the home visiting service or have children that can go out into the school setting. So trying to help encourage them to participate in those programs, especially since some really have a lack of trust. Some adults, especially young adults, have a lack of trust in different agencies and partners. So we're trying to eliminate that distrust and try to show that, no, these agencies are here to help and we can kind of work together to make that happen.
Identifying those agencies and oftentimes identifying those agencies where those individuals live within their respective neighborhood.
Yeah, trying to get them involved in activities and programs right near them, like in their neighborhoods, and trying to let them know that it is safe and they're here to help. And sometimes parents don't even know these services exist. So trying to help them.
That was a great transition for Jackie. So Jackie, do you want to share a little bit about your work in Head Start?
Sure. So I have been a site supervisor, so I've worked with the families and the children, and now I'm the parent engagement coordinator. So I'm mostly working with parent leadership, with policy council, with other parenting groups like parenting classes and partnerships with the Early Childhood Alliance for the moms group. And that actually, the trust factor came up yesterday at one of our parent meetings at our Beeville site when I was talking about the groups for moms and dads. One of the moms was saying, who helps with childcare? I don't really trust anyone with my child. Yeah. And I think it's really helpful that our faces are out here and we're able to build those connections with families, because I know that I would never leave. I would never have someone watching other people's children that I didn't trust with my own. And so being able to have that conversation with families helps them feel more comfortable and more that the services are more accepted.
Yeah.
So,
And that's really important. One thing you just mentioned is how you develop these levels of trust within the families and within the parents that you work with. Talk to me a little bit about that. What are some of the ways that you try to build those degrees of trust with your parents?
I think it just starts with really creating an environment where people feel comfortable to either talk and communicate and open up or to not. If they feel like they're more comfortable just being there and being in the space, that's okay. Being transparent, being, showing that you have integrity. I think that's really important for families so that they know, what's happening here is important and we believe in you. So, and we provide a lot of other resources as well to help and support that communication between us, but also out in the community.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what are some of those resources or what are some of those topics that you see come up the most when you work with parents?
Sure. So Head Start believes in the parent engagement right from the beginning. And so we asked parents in the beginning of the year, what kind of services are you interested in or what things are you interested in learning more about? And then we provide services based on that. And so sometimes like financial resources, financial well-being, goal setting, budgeting, those kind of things. We offer other outside resources to come in and talk about counseling and therapy options. We talk about other resources for like legal things, housing. We support the whole family because we do offer opportunities for everyone in the family. So we talked about the multi-generational moms, dads, grandpas, great-grandpas, grandpas, great-grandpas. And even like siblings sometimes are included in some of our events. So we try to bring in as many outside resources as we can.
Wonderful, thank you. And Saisha, in your new role, it's more of an administrative position, right? You are the commissioner. But you have this wealth of knowledge of working in our community and working with families. So talk to us a little bit about some of your previous experiences and some of the successes that you've seen with a whole family approach.
I think first and foremost, and most important for me, is that trust, building true trust, transparency with families. But I am such a big component of co-creating with families, not prescribing what a family needs and wants, but allowing them the opportunity in an open, trusted space to share what they want, what they need, and then designing around and serving them around whatever their needs are. For example, the financial literacy, just having a confidential space to share with other moms or other dads or play groups. And I think that's where, the work led me, is bringing parents together, co-creating with them. But I couldn't have done that without our partners, right? So Jackie and I partnered often, and, they provided the space and the food, and we provided, the facilitators, and then we had the fathers there and the children and the grandmothers, right? We brought the whole family into one building at the same time and all serviced at the same time, but on topics that they wanted to hear, they wanted to talk about. And then with Sarah, we partnered on 2Gen. With back then, I was director of Family Voice at Early Childhood Alliance, but working with Sarah and 2Gen to really bring moms together so that they start to build relationships. Because ultimately, right, we're not always going to be here.
Yeah.
Systems, organizations, yes, will be around, but the goal is to have parents helping one another. I want the village back, I guess. I want to bring the village back, and it has started happening. I know the Parent Advisory Council at the Early Childhood Alliance, parents are now running it. They're facilitating that group instead of a staff like myself facilitating. So it's naturally happening.
And one of the comments and one of the themes I'm hearing too is that there are partnerships in their structure but a lot of the joy and the success comes out of spontaneity, right? And coming out of the relationship building. You want to talk a little bit about that?
I just think, I mean, we're not all, things just kind of organically happen, you're right.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's when it gets fun. It's like Sarah will call and say, hey, I have this group of women, you know, from 2Gen. You think you can come talk to them? You know, I think they'll listen. And then I pop up in one of her groups and they listen. And then not only, what I love about it is when you see these families out and about, they know Sarah, they know Jackie, they know myself, they know the organizations and
Yeah.
systems that we're a part of. And they're trusting us now. It's not just hiding kind of to themselves or in a corner, not asking for help.
Right.
They're more comfortable to ask for the things that they need for them and their families, so life gets a little bit better.
Mhm.
And that ties back to Jackie's point, is how important that factor of trust is, not just with the families among themselves, the families with you, but then also among the partners as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can call each other anytime.
Yeah.
And even now as commissioner, the hope is to get folks using the parks, to get 2Gen to have events in the parks, or, you know, moms playing family meetups.
Yeah.
And so we can continue that work specifically around intergenerational,
Mhm.
you know.
And I've heard all of you kind of hint at this, but maybe it would be good to really clarify, you know, what are some specific strategies that you've all found to be successful in getting families to set goals and helping them determine their goals? And you know, I think a lot of people are inspired by this, but they're also maybe hesitant from the coaching perspective and what are some of the tactics? So are there tools or tactics within your, let's say, toolbox, right? That you think has proved successful for you?
Yeah, I mean, so we didn't just make up stuff on our own. We've kind of did some research and tried to figure out, okay, how can we motivate people or motivate families, motivate groups? So we actually, we use Empath's model of mobility mentoring for setting goals. Empath, it's actually, the agency is Economic Mobility Pathways, which is based out of Boston, but Empath for short. So it's all about setting smart goals and having those goals be family-led, in my opinion. So instead of us making a goal, like we sit down with families, we're talking to them, we're talking about the 5 areas of family well-being that Todd mentioned earlier. So if we're talking about social capital, like we were just talking about, and mom or dad mentions like that they don't really have a lot of supports or they don't have anybody they can turn to in an emergency, we're gonna then have a conversation around that and see if it is something that parent would like to maybe work on and try to set a goal. And then if they don't want to, we don't push it, we don't force it. If they do, then we talk about, okay, what does that look like? And try to have them create their own goals. I think that's really helpful because if I set goals for you, why would you complete them? Like, you know, it wouldn't really make sense, right? So it's family led, it's parent driven. If the child's old enough, we talk to them. Right now we work with young parents, so a lot of the kids are toddlers or babies. So we're kind of talking about goals for kids with the parent. But as we expand and start working with older kids and youth, we'll probably do the same thing with them too, like ask them what they want. So I think that has really worked, is having it be led by them, driven by them, and really making sure that it's a SMART goal, which is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time sensitive. Because if it's too broad, I mean, we can set a goal like, you know, Jackie, you have to get a job, or maybe you want to get a job, but that's so broad and it's overwhelming. So I think what's helped us, and there's been over 100 goals set and more than half of them met in our program. I think it's really that it's family led, personally driven, and then it starts small.
And so you're really listening to the families. Yeah. Jackie, what do you think?
Also, one of the challenges in reaching goals is, for me personally, I feel like I never really understood like long-term planning. And so now if I'm planning an event or something, I have to really look at the timeline and look through, okay, what needs to be done here before I can get to that end result. And I think that a lot of people are in that same situation where they need a little support getting to that, taking those little steps to get to that goal. So really just taking like, what do you foresee in the future for this goal? And then what little things do we need to do at what time along the timeline to get there? I think that's helpful. And also I've noticed in some of the peer support groups, the parents sort of create, as we're having conversation about things, new goals come up. Like, for example, one of the dads who is not originally from this country was saying, like, his son was saying, I love you to him. And that wasn't something that he did. And not that that's unique to not living in this country. I think that that's
Right.
might be a common thing across the board, but he wasn't saying that. And through the conversation, we started asking, did he feel that was important to him? And he decided that it was important to him. And then about 3 weeks later, we circled back to that conversation. And I said, I was wondering how you're feeling about that. He said, I'm saying it all the time now, and it feels really good. It seems like such a small thing,
Right.
but it's a larger goal of building
Right.
that connection in the family.
And I think that's something Maribel will talk about, is that we talk a lot about systems reforms, but really much of this takes place on a very small micro level that comes from relationships. So Saisha, what do you think?
Just quickly, we use the model called COFI, Community Organizing Family Issues, with a National Parent Leader Network. It's where parents get together and learn about goals together and then build on them. So they started with individual goals, then family goals, and then how do we now serve the community through goal sharing and setting? And so I believe in that model, and I think that parents, I watch parents grow and become really confident in, here's my individual goals, this is what I want to get done, this is what my family needs and our goals we're going to work on together. And by the way, my community's there, I want to set goals for community as well. And so that's the model I live by.
And so thinking about the family and the individual, but also how do you function within a neighborhood? How do you function within a community? Yeah, that's really powerful and beautiful. These were the topics, and this was the knowledge and expertise that was given to more than 80 participants, which was really amazing. And it was a really inspired room where there was a lot of energy, and what we've heard is not necessarily barriers, but how do we set goals and how do we progress and how do we come up with solutions? And Maribel's going to report out on what others were inspired from these great ideas. But what were some of the larger solutions and some of the larger findings that emerged from the event?
So what was interesting in the event is after the panel, we gave people some examples to work on, and we randomly made them organize based on a persona. So personas are basically a tool we use from human-centered design to build composite characters that we collected information during PISA's community needs assessment, and that helped us build a profile of what would be a target person that is living in poverty and their family members. And it's a story, because stories help us understand context. When we listen to just data, we're forgetting that there's multiple things happening to people all at once. And so we handed these personas. They were overwhelmingly positively accepted, but what was interesting is how people reacted to them. Is they really started understanding the not only the issues that families face, but also their strengths. Because a lot of times when we're working with families living in poverty, we forget that there's a lot of inherent strength to live the way they live and still sort of succeed. And so people have started having conversations about how they would solve these situations. And one of the main, like 3 main takeaways, you can group all the other takeaways in, is first was talking about how do we build systems for families to thrive, not just self-sufficiency. And when we're talking exactly about what you all were saying, right? There has to be more of a culture of what does success look like instead of compliance only, like you have talked about, Sarah. And also the basic needs are insufficient. When we're just talking about food, getting food on the table, we're forgetting that there's so much more. And one of the things that people said is, sometimes we're talking about prescriptive solutions. So a lot of our programs come with things that they cover and things that they don't. And so they're prescriptive in a certain manner. But how do we work through that structure to provide people with the solutions that they really need and look beyond of what that prescription is? And so, for example, then we'll stop doing things that sometimes don't make sense. So there was one participant who said, lead is affecting children's lives, but we keep testing children instead of fixing the houses that are poisoning them, right? Or people tell me workforce programs assume people need a job instead of asking, do you have clothes for an interview? So we're not solving these solutions. We're providing a solution that's really not solving the problem.
Yeah.
And so when we're thinking of that, we have to start thinking about how do we build benefit slides instead of benefits cliffs? I think you all talked about, people reach a certain goal and then they lose the benefits and it's scary for them. And when we're thinking of that, we also should be thinking about how do we build wealth? How do we build wealth generating and sustainability in the families, and not just thinking about how do we solve and patch and bring a Band-Aid. And so when we have things like that, we'd start maybe making solutions a little bit differently. There was a participant who said, with gun violence, if a son passes, the family can lose their home if the paperwork isn't filed ahead of time. The family can lose their home and if they can't provide proof that they are next of kin. These are things that are real, that happen to everybody.
Yep.
And these are essential vulnerabilities that can be prevented. So that's one takeaway. Another takeaway that came out is that we need to provide families with bandwidth, because sometimes they're overburdened, but not only families, but also service providers. The system, there's more need than there's solutions and there's funding for. And so the anxiety that creates in the service providers, in the families, sometimes blocks solutions. And when you're looking at it, one of the things that they said is there's so many waiting lists right now that by the time people get help, something traumatic has happened. And service providers, or you all, are sitting there watching that coming, right? So when we understand that, we might want to think about how do we design programs so that they're simpler to understand, so that the language is easy, the steps are clear for families, that the timeline is predictable for them, the office hours are approachable for them. A lot of our programs offer during office hours, and if families are supposed to work, then how do they make it to these? Meet people where they are, and before it used to be in person, but now it also can be online for some, right?
Yeah.
Also co-designing the solution with families is so important, because otherwise we don't understand really what it is that they need, right? And when we're thinking about the trauma, really talking to service providers such as you is a great way to not have to, and using personas is a great way for us not to have families revisit their trauma just for us to understand it. So, and finally, the third one was talking about how do we provide building networks for resilience. You all talked about it, that sometimes we keep on thinking, oh, social services programs such as DSS or PIECES programs should be providing these solutions, but actually there's more to that. We're a community, we're an environment of resilience that we can build. And for that, we need to make connections. One of the things that was highly valued of the meeting was actually forcing people to be a little bit uncomfortable and talking to people they would have never talked to before, help them find resources and ideas that they didn't know existed. Can we build those community bonds at the service provider level, at the family level? You all talked about how with peer support groups, people can get together and when they listen to other people doing something, they get inspired of what they can do. And they hear solutions that are very pragmatic and practical for them. So how do we create peer support groups? How do we understand the family in itself and the caregiving that has to happen within a family unit? So caregiving is a burden for all generations, but it's also a strength in all generations. And what they were saying, a lot of the examples came down to older adults can be sometimes advocates for the community and a source of resilience. Like they were saying, like Mr. J, I am recognized as the neighborhood grandma who provides structure. We take that important work for granted. Kids don't remember the popular toy, but they'll remember Mr. J. And that is important. We sometimes have meetings with parents and we forget the older adults that make that happen.
Yeah.
At the same time, when community is crucial because people need to feel safe where they live. And it's not just about gun violence. It's about having that trusted partner, right? And so when we get together and discuss community, we sometimes mention older adults, but mostly we don't. And yet in this small group, we are all connected with that topic. We need to bring all generations to the conversation, and that is true.
Yeah.
So access to resources should not be a privileged information, and yet it is. And it's because we keep on waiting for the perfect system thing that has all the information in one place. But the reality is you all talked about it, how many of the innovations and things you did was because you pick up the phone and call each other.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about building resilience, we're talking building resilience at the systems level, at the programs level, and at people's level. And so most of these solutions, they were very practical. Like race was a topic that came up when Jennifer Gregory, for example, presented and said the systems actually are working the way they should. It's not that they're not working, they're working the way they should by leaving Black and brown people out of them. That is true, but when we sat together, it was more than just race and just these systems. It's what we can do and these pragmatic steps that we can do for each other.
Well, thank you, Maribel. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Saisha. Thank you, Sarah. Hopefully we gave Brian, hopefully we gave the audience some things to think about and some questions. So we'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. I am updating my video here. I'm back. Thank you all for an interesting discussion and for being here on an important topic. Thanks to everybody joining us as participants. We had a number of questions submitted in advance, and we'll cover many of them. If you have questions, you're free, participants, to attendees, to put them in the chat. It's unlikely we'll get to many of them, but feel free. And if we can, we'll try to sneak them in. But I'd like to start perhaps expanding upon some of the findings that Maribel had shared. We had a question from Vicky, who says, as community organizations, how do we collaborate to impact families so their basic needs are met? And in particular, I'm curious how this approach, right, how a whole family two-gen approach affects the way in which, and we've talked about it some, but I'd like to expand on, go deeper into that, how, not-for-profits in the human services world do their work, how they can do it better, how they can look at both the problems and those solutions differently. Again, some of which we've already talked about, but I wonder if you all might expand upon those ideas.
Yeah, I have an idea.
Please.
So I mentioned that, we work with just the adults and we siloed those families into just adult, child. I think that in our county, we silo services too. I think there's the services for children, there's the services for families, there's the services for food, there's services for child, it's all kind of separated. So I personally, on my end, because I come from a child welfare background also, I try to break through those silos personally, and I try to find out who's doing that work. So if there's something that our families are telling us they need or they want, or asking for something, I'll try to find out if it's available. So I did this in child welfare too. We would do kind of like we would call it like cafe connections, where we would bring in outside partners once a month. On a Friday, we'd have some coffee and donuts, and we would have community partners come in to talk to child welfare workers about who they are and what they do, because some of the work that we do can be so siloed that we don't even know what's around us. So if we don't know, who do families know? So I don't know if you agree with me on that, but That's what I try to do personally.
And I would imagine that was beneficial, not just for you at the county, but also for those folks who were coming in, right? To hear what their
Mhm.
partners who have a little bit different take or focus on a little bit different area, I'm
Yeah.
sure was valuable for them as well.
Yeah,
Thank you.
definitely.
And I think to Vicky's question as well is, you know, sometimes, and no pun against the county, it's hard for families to trust systems, right? So
Yes.
you need someone like I had lived experience in my role. I was director of Family Voice. I could potentially tap into families that Sarah would not be able to, right?
Mhm.
And so this partnership worked because I had families coming to me that's like, I'm skeptical of those systems, but I trust you because I see you in my community. I see
Mhm.
what you're doing. You know, you listen to me. Can you help me navigate those systems?
And that's where the
Gotcha.
Gregory quote comes back.
Yeah.
When the systems were designed
Yep.
against Black and brown
Yep.
people, then you need that. You need
Right.
exactly what you're pointing out.
And so often I'm really a supporter of like, how do we get moms to start their own mom groups? How do we get, you know, yes, we start them with some support and then you let them kind of fly, open their wings and fly, because ultimately that's how we're gonna bring these communities back up, is working within communities, them depending on one another, right? For example, my kids play football, right? I pick up 4 little kids to go to the football field 4 nights a week. Why? Because their families don't have transportation and I know I have the resources to get them there, right? And that's part of that village and part of that, like, we as community can support each other as well.
Yeah.
And I think that also.
Aisha, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mary. I'll ask my question.
That translates to institutions and to service providers. So one of the things people said is, people need a single place that doesn't just send them away after. They need follow through and follow back with them, and soft handover is even better. And that's, we can only do that if we know each other.
Yeah.
I would just add, I think the event that we had in person was impactful for me because I do live in that silo as well. And I didn't know of a lot of the organizations that were there and the work that they did until we had a chance to have some conversation. So I think having more of those opportunities like the cafe or those groups where we can get together and have some time to talk and kind of talk through how could a collaboration look in the future? Or, you know, like you said, we have those relationships, we trust each other. We're more likely to refer families or do that soft handover. So.
And I can't believe, I mean, none of this sounds, I can't believe there are folks out there, service providers of whatever stripe, right? At a 501c3 in the public space, a volunteer even. Nobody's going to say, boy, I really want to stay in my lane. I'm not into collaboration, right? But there must be some, I mean, this is a change, right? A change in tenor, a change in outlook, a change in systems. Have you found it difficult with some organizations or departments or collaborations to push the ball forward? As you know, it's a relatively new effort, right? It doesn't go back decades and decades, but are there challenges related to that in sort of breaking old ways of thinking or doing?
I don't think it's necessarily the change as it is the time and resources from what on my end. I feel like I would be thrilled to go out and have more collaborations and bring more people in. It's just a matter of having the time and resources to make that actually happen. That's probably the biggest challenge.
Because Jackie, I imagine it's quicker. I'm sorry to interrupt, but real quick, it's quicker just to solve the immediate problem, but rather it'd be better if we talked about what are the underlying causes. And I take your point. All right, thank you. Yeah. Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, from the government perspective, it has been a little bit difficult because what we're doing is so innovative and so different. And we have specific New York State rules, right, and regulations that we have to follow in terms of for people to receive benefits. And our whole staff is just used to determining eligibility and then sending the parents on the way, like we were talking about. And so now we're pulling the parents back in and we're saying, no, we're going to actually help you do more. Like, we're going to actually stay with you longer. So I think it's been not necessarily a challenge. It's just been something new and different. And we're still tweaking and developing that, which is actually kind of fun. Kind of nice. do that.
Cool. Anybody else want to come in on this point?
I just
Saisha, I'm
think
sorry.
sometimes it's capacity, right? It's not that organizations don't want to partner. It's their funding stream is so narrow that they have to abide by those rules that funding has to be spent on, specific things. I also think it's, the ability to like, I don't have enough resources, staffing, I'm over capacity as it is. Now the partner, I would love to partner, but it's difficult.
Gotcha. All right, thank you. Well said.
Relationships take time, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. We had another question from Carolyn, who I dare say is probably not far from the room in which you're sitting, who asked, what do you see as the greatest strength of our community with respect to social mobility for families? And I'm curious, a few people did mention the term social mobility. Curious how it fits into this idea of a whole family approach. And to Carolyn's point, what are our community strengths?
I mean, I think it's a strength that we're just recognizing, like Saisha was saying, and Jackie, that people need people, right? And that we need the village back. And I think for a while, everybody was just taking care of themselves. And now I think we're noticing, well, no, that doesn't work. Like I do need Saisha to pick up my kid because my car broke down. So I think it's a strength that our community is actually acknowledging it now and seeing it and trying to make some changes.
And it's also, how do I learn from, like, mom A and mom B get together and now they're learning from each other, teaching each other how to cook, teaching each other about events that are happening. We've seen some beautiful relationships come out of our mom groups because they built these friendships, and now they're building on one another, and helping each other find jobs and babysit while they're at work. It's beautiful to see that happen.
Cool. Anybody else want to come in on that point? I'll pick up a question that was posted in the Q&A by Anne. Who or what agency drives this? I think in a sense, right, we kind of know that what is this, right? I mean, the finding was a collaboration between two not-for-profits. We have representatives from the city and the county. But curious if there's thank goodness for A, B, and C to push this forward, or are there other perhaps actors or players not here today who you could point to say, their work has been instrumental in this whole family approach and some of the success we're starting to see. Curious about that question.
I would jump in and give credit to Peace and Todd because they've led family engagement from, forever. When I think of like families, getting families together, family engagement, I've always thought of Peace to start with. And I think, county coming in with funding all the time, right? Being able to fund the programs. I do think there's other players. I came from Early Childhood Alliance. They're a part of this as well. But I think what just organically started happening was like, hey, Jackie, I'm running this mom's program. We need a place for it. What do you think about housing it and working with us, right? Yeah. And she was like, I think that's great because I'm already running this fatherhood group, And then we reached out to Sarah, like, hey, Sarah, you got the moms, you and the moms. Jackie has the space. We have a few moms. How do we pull this together? I think it just started organically with conversation.
Yeah. And I think I do have to say, from the county perspective, support from the county executive and the deputy county executive and also Sarah Merrick for taking a chance on it and realizing something more needed to happen. So I do have to, give them a shout out that it was a huge leap and it's turned into some really good things. So I think, they're not the sole lead on it, right? I can't say the county's the sole lead on it, but for the county to jump in on it is amazing.
As much as I want to accept Saisha's credit about Peace,
But
I think one of the challenges I would throw back at your question, Brian, is that I don't think there should be a single lead.
Right.
And when we start looking and addressing, this works, Onondaga County's got it figured out, Peace has got it figured out. I think we fall into pitfalls where we see one thing that works and we try to replicate it.
Yeah.
And I think what you're hearing here is how sloppy, and we keep saying this idea organic, but how many failures did you also have before this also worked, right?
Yeah.
I would also say, again, I would also make a larger systems argument that there are people that were absent in this conversation. There were people that were absent in this conversation at the event. You know, that's politicians, that's philanthropy, that is bureaucracies beyond just the ones we're talking about. So I get a little hesitant when we start arguing, and I'm not picking on you, Brad, but I'm just kind of sharing, like, I get hesitant saying that one thing is working because I think it distracts us. And I also think that there's shortcomings with that too. Like, you know, one of the findings, I do think that, for instance, matters of race and disability were underplayed from the event conversation.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to say that these findings were successful, but these findings are one step in a continued process that, well, we had some good leads here. Let's maybe a next event, let's bring in matters of race. Like if we talk about lead, for instance, it's impossible to talk about lead without incorporating race and disability.
Yeah. And I think my answer, Todd, to you, but my why I put peace, I remember, I'll just go back as a kid. Peace got families involved from the beginning. I went to America. My mother had peer relationships and friends because she volunteered at Merrick. They had to volunteer, right? They had to ride the bus. They encourage families to do that. My mother built peer relationships because peace created those environments and those opportunities. And that's what I'm saying. When it comes to like parent and family engagement, I think I've learned a lot of lessons from peace.
Yeah. And Head Start is the first, really, in our nation, 2-generational approach to helping families. So I think it needs a little bit of credit, like Saisha was saying.
I think Todd should have accepted the kudos, but your point is well taken. We had a question posted in the Q&A and also one posted in advance. KD asked about how does one start to join these groups or volunteer to help? And Pamela had submitted a question in advance. How and where, through a whole family lens, can volunteers best provide support? I assume some of that comes through the not-for-profits, right, through which they volunteer, but curious what y'all have to say about that topic, please.
You have a lot of volunteers,
A lot of volunteers.
Yeah.
Well, the majority of my volunteers come from Head Start parents. And I think Todd actually probably has more experience with outside volunteers than I do. But the majority of ours comes from parents volunteering for things. I think if people wanted to get involved, they can certainly reach out to us and we can have that conversation about how and when. There's plenty of things that volunteers can do.
But I also think, like, I know Early Childhood Alliance has several community committees that they invite people to kind of pair up in smaller groups and do the work. Often we want to volunteer and we want to do the work. We just don't want to sit at a meeting. And I think some of those committees are the opportunity for folks to learn, listen, and then get out and do. There's always opportunities for both, I know, students and community folks to get involved in this work. I mean, peer facilitators, peer mentors, you know, if someone, I'm a mom and I'm a adult, I don't have it all together. Sometimes I need a peer coach, right? I have a coach myself, and I think often we don't have enough people to coach a family. Just to volunteer their time and say, hey, let me teach you how I grocery shop and it helps me, you know, my SNAP benefits last a whole month.
And you're talking social capital here. And again, a theme that I've heard repeatedly is this notion of a community. Volunteers are critical, whether it's one-offs or multiple times. You are introducing people to different ideas and different levels of support. That's only going to hopefully strengthen the families that we're working with.
I would like to add, it's just be there and listen deeply to what people need. And sometimes the person next to you may be somebody that needs your help, and sometimes you'll need theirs.
Right.
And really, sometimes it's not about money, it's about time, it's about listening, it's about giving people the time to figure things out for themselves. And I always tell my kids, because my kids go to city schools and there's a lot of need there, bring somebody along with you. If you learn about something, share it. We don't need to volunteer only. We should be doing it continuously in our lives.
Yeah. And I think just even reaching out to your neighbor or like a neighbor, you know what I mean? Just asking if they need help or if they need help saying yes, right? I think that helps too.
So many, when we worked with seniors for our community needs assessment, so many of the seniors are thriving in place because their neighbor is going and getting their mail, right?
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
and that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And vice versa, when my kids were little and it snowed, one day we come home and the driveways plowed, the sidewalks plowed, and we couldn't afford somebody to do it for us, and we were both asking who it was, and then the next day, we see our neighbor, who's an older adult, going and doing, he had the snowplow, he just went and did it. We can all do this for each other.
It's sharing the resources, right?
Yeah.
My neighbor, I don't have a snow blower, he snow blows, I have a riding lawnmower that really raggedy one. So, but he drives it because I'm scared. So we share equipment.
Yeah.
Amongst 3 houses, we share equipment.
Yeah.
But it's those little, that doesn't take much energy at all to say, hey neighbor, I have this tool, you have this tool, let's work together.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Just add
Well,
also.
sadly, we're out of time. Any last thoughts, folks would like to
Jackie has.
share?
Yeah,
Oh, please, I'm sorry,
I was
Jackie.
just gonna
Go ahead.
add, if someone has a specific talent that they were willing to share as a volunteer, like for example, if they have a background in finance and they want to come and volunteer for some parent committees or something to share their knowledge, they can certainly reach out. That's also very welcome.
Cool. All right. Very good. Any other last thoughts before we wrap up? Any hopes for the future? Fears, let's be careful of this, or boy, this is great. Any thoughts, anybody? Saisha, please.
I mean, to Katie's point, remembering part of whole family are fathers, right? It's just not mom and grandma and children, but we have to continue to include fathers in these conversations and in these programming opportunities, or just authentic, like grassroots, bringing folks together. We need everyone involved in this.
Gotcha. Well, thank you. Well, thank you everybody for participating here today to our panel. Thanks for all the folks who showed up to listen and to engage. These focus forums happen most months, and like any forum that has preceded this, the recording will be available on our website. We are also a not-for-profit focus, so anybody who cares to make a small or large donation, you can do so on our website, and we'd be happy to accept it. But with that, thanks again, everybody. Hope you all have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.